Welcome to Tales of Blue, where I'm joined by a hugely popular player who appeared over 120 times for City between 1976 and 1979, although many of us wish it was many, many more times. Welcome, Gary Owen. How are you doing, Gary?
Yeah, I'm good, Mark. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And thanks for joining us tonight.
Pleasure.
So, Gary, who were a young Gary Owen's footballing influences on you growing up?
Well, City fans won't like what I'm going to say, but it's fact. George Best, without doubt. I know he was on the red side, but the time when it was like Law, Charlton, Best, definitely George was my favourite player. I suppose for a lot of kids at my era and my age, he was the first pop star footballer, really. So, and plus he was unbelievable ability. Now, that would probably lead you to thinking that I would have supported United, but I didn't. If anybody, I would have supported Everton, actually, because I love the Kendall Ball Harvey era. And obviously, one of the first games I saw was Everton play Southampton, beat them 8-2, and Joe Royle scored 6. And quite ironically, less than 3 years later, I was his teammate at Manchester City. He was picking me up to take me to training. So quite surreal that somebody who was an idol, and Joe was, obviously, as I was growing up as a kid, and seeing him score 6 goals. But we were fortunate because our dads, 4 of us, one supported United, City, Everton, Liverpool. So we were taken to see all those teams. And quite ironically, I've just told you about the Everton one was the first game. The City one was actually when I signed schoolboy forms for Manchester City when I was 14. And it was a League Cup tie when the miners' strike was on and the floodlights couldn't go on. And it was pouring down with rain. We played Coventry in a League Cup quarter-final, absolutely pouring down with rain. And those were the days where your dad would let you bunk off school to go and watch football. I don't think that happened these days. But yeah, so the City game was against Coventry in that League Cup quarter-final, pouring down rain. We got soaking wet. Obviously, the Everton game, 8-2. United game was a Charity Shield game at Old Trafford where, and again, quite ironically, the 2 goalkeepers that made history that day, one was Pat Jennings and the other one was Alex Stepney. Pat Jennings from drop kicking out of his own goal mouth, and Alex Stepney for allowing it to bounce, and it was obviously August time, Charity Shield. It bounced in front of him, over the top of him, and rolled into the net. So he scored, Pat Jennings. And again, quite ironically, that Alex Stepney and Pat Jennings are both my friends now. So it's a bit surreal that these people I'm telling you about, as I'm growing up, who were like idols, you only saw them from a distance, actually became teammates and great friends. In fact, I was playing golf with Pat Jennings only 2 weeks ago in La Manga. So it is, you have to pinch yourself sometimes, even though, I had a great career, but something you've always wanted to do. And these people that you looked at to try and emulate are now not only teammates or players you played against, but actually your friends as well now. So it is a bit surreal if you do what I've done in my career, started very young and played with some great players.
So it's rumoured a host of clubs are interested in signing you as a youngster, including Manchester United. Yeah. What were the main reasons you chose City, Gary?
Homely. I mean, as soon as I went to there, it felt, and I'm not the first person today to say this. And I imagine you've interviewed a lot of former players and even players that didn't come through the ranks but joined us still have a great affection with City. It was one of those clubs, and has always been. As soon as you walked through that door, you felt at home. You felt part of the family, and it was that sort of influence going there and almost feeling at home immediately, and thought, well, if I'm going to have a chance of playing football, this is probably the best place I want to do it. And it obviously proven right because I made many friends over the years. Not only, it was like as a schoolboy and apprentice growing up, and some of those players didn't go on to playing the game, but we've kept friends. And then obviously playing with fantastic players as I was able to do in the time while I was at City. So the club Manchester City has always had that homely, friendly feeling. And, I'm not just saying that having come through the ranks, but I think a lot of players that were bought and come to the club and then left still have a great affection for Manchester City.
So once you joined as trainee, who were the early impressions on you at City, and what was life like at a professional football club for a young Gary Owen?
Well, I'd ride a bike from my house to the train station in St Helens because the buses weren't reliable. So you ride a bike to the station. Then I'd jump on a train, get off at Victoria Station, run like hell to get up to Newton Street to get the 76 bus that got you to outside Maine Road for like about 9:20. And you had to be in obviously earlier because you had jobs to do. In those days, apprentices did jobs. That was either putting kits out, cleaning boots, taking the first team kit away to the laundry, cleaning. It was all that sort of job that, just, in my opinion, I think it gives you good grounding. It makes you appreciate when you actually, and if you do, get into the first team and into that squad, you realise how lucky it is, and just gives you a bit of a grounding to have to pick up somebody else's sweat stained shirts and filthy boots, going to have to clean them and all that stuff. It just gives you a little bit of grounding. So for me, going there and job, you was given different jobs, but one of the jobs, as I said, would have been, as you went through that year of apprenticeship, it would be to go in that first team dressing room, which nobody wanted to go into because you felt like a fish out of water, because they were waiting to ridicule you, to really put you through the mill, jokingly, of course, not to be personal, but just to get used to football banter. And it was a hard lesson to learn, but you had to go through it. It's like initiation. But then, I'm clearing up and looking at people like Francis Lee, Colin Bell, Mike Summerby, Rodney Marsh, Dennis Law, who was back for his second time then, Alan Oakes, who I eventually made my debut when Alan was injured, and eventually probably took over that sort of a position that he was playing. So, Willie Donkey, all international footballers, Big Joe Corrigan, who ended up playing alongside as well. So those players, and I can't forget Boothie, can I? A Big Tommy, because he still works for the club now on a match day. I'm great friends with him. And obviously Barnes had just started to come through, but not in the first team at that point. He was a young professional, but he'd be in the other dressing room. So he was going in there, seeing these players and trying to emulate what they were doing, not just only on the pitch, but off the pitch as well, trying to behave and the way they did, and hoping that one day you'd be sat in there, and thankfully it did happen. You'd be sat in there and you could be enjoying the football, the profession that they were doing. So that was always, those players you were always looking up to try and emulate both on and off the pitch, and try to get into that dressing room. And that was the key. You want to get out of that reserve team dressing room and youth team dressing room into that first team. But once you got in there, then you had to stand your corner. There was no hiding place in that first team dressing room.
Well, I was going to say, do you recall a time, Gary, where a youth team player maybe overstepped the mark with one of the first team lads, got a bit cheeky? Do you recall a story that springs to mind? Not necessarily yourself, maybe another player.
Well, not so much. What you couldn't do, because you was in awe of them and a little bit intimidated, because if they said jump, you would probably say how high, because you were intimidated because of the, you'd watched them a year before. You remember we were at school a year before, so the only time we got close to seeing those players was on television, and some of them became your heroes. And then all of a sudden, now the teammates of yours, even though you're not playing in the first team with them, you're actually teammates of them in training. Your teammates when the first team needed a reserve team to play against them. So these players now, you had to get over that experience of looking at them and being in awe of them, to a situation where you wanted to show them that you're equally as good as them, or try to be as good as them. So when you went to that first team dressing room, you didn't speak unless you were spoken to. You had no opinion. That's a certainty, because otherwise then you'd be took to task. But they'd always play tricks on you. They'd always make it difficult for you, but always in the spirit of football banter. I don't think there's anything that was personal or anything that would class as bullying. It was just football banter that you had to put up with, because the next lot of apprentices that came in after you, they'd be going through the same routine. But as we all know now, it's changed.
Yeah.
And kids don't get jobs to do now. They just go in there, and in some instances, some boys who at a young age think they've made it before they've even got on the first rung, and that's the downfall. So there were pluses and and minuses from being an apprentice to what it is now. But for me, I thought it was a great upbringing. And there was probably plenty of occasions where somebody might have said something out of turn. The only thing I can remember where I got absolutely murdered. Obviously, I was an apprentice, and everybody was coming in like new clothes and stuff because you was earning a little bit more money. I mean, not any great money, trust me. But there used to be a shop on Market Street called Stolen from Ivor. Everybody knows that shop, trust me, in the 70s. And I bought this jumper, like a short sleeve jumper and cardigan that matched. And what possessed me to buy that, I have no idea. And went in the next day thinking I was the top man. Oh, God almighty. I think that was the first and last time I ever wore it. I got absolutely murdered. I just walked in with it and I knew as soon as they started, that is not coming out again. I think I ended up binning it on the way home. So I probably went home without a cardigan, without a jumper, just in a T-shirt. But that got binned very quickly. But you had to stand your corner. You had to give as good as you got. But it was a hard lesson when you're a kid coming fresh-faced out of school and going into a football dressing room. And anybody will tell you, when they finish football, they miss that banter. But, it's something that is quite unique to sport. I think rugby probably has it, football has it. And that's what happens when you have team sports. So being an apprentice in those days, you had to earn the right to go in that dressing room and get out of that dressing room still in one piece. But all great experience.
So apart from the advice to lose the cardigan, what was the best bit of early advice given to you starting out at City, and by who?
I think dog eat dog. And I know that sounds a bit harsh, but it is dog eat dog. You have to show in training that you are a bit different than somebody else to get your chance. I was fortunate that all the coaches, first of all, Harry Godwin brought me to the football club. He was chief scout then. And then Ken Barnes took over after that. Both Ken and Harry Godwin had great faith in me, although small, light. They believe I had a big enough heart, as we've seen with a lot of players. Not always the biggest has to be the best. Not always the biggest has to be the strongest and the best, as Lionel Messi has shown, as probably people like Kevin Keegan, Billy Bremner, Johnny Giles, you can go on and on and on. So then Steve Fleet was my U-team coach, who believed in me without doubt. When I was passed on to Dave Ewing, he totally believed in me. So I had people all the time that believed that they could get the best out of me and believed that I could go on and maybe force myself into not only their team, which was a youth team or A team, or then it was the reserves, but also to get into the first team. And obviously, when Skip, Tony Buck and Bill Taylor, his coach then, they gave me my first chance because Alan Oak was injured. And I came in for my debut against Wolves, and the rest is such is history. We managed to win the game. And then I started next season. We'd lost a couple early doors, but I was not in the first team squad because I was only like just 17. And we got beaten United, I think. And the next game after, Alan Oakes had an injury, I think. And Tony Buck said to me, "You're playing tomorrow." Yeah, bloody hell. I mean, you look back now. And when they said about relaxing before a game, there's no relaxing yet. I was like hyped, like you've no idea. I couldn't wait for that game to come and that match to start.
Gary, can you describe the feeling at age just 17 when you make your debut against Wolves at Maine Road? Can you describe that feeling? I mean, it was over 32,000.
Well, I always felt
there. Do you remember the game still clearly?
Of course I do. I remember before we played United, and we're at Park Road, which is Cheadle, we used to train, and the reserves was on one team, and those days used to be like a mini derby. And we were playing United reserves, and the first team was at Old Trafford. And Dave Ewing said to me on the morning, obviously I went with Virgil, he said, no, you're not with me today, son. You were the first team. So in my mind, I'm playing. Of course I am. In my mind, because one thing I didn't like was confidence. So I thought, well, I'm playing. So anyway, I trained with them. We did all stuff. He said, right now, sit down. So here's the team for tomorrow. And he went through the team. He mentioned Joe Corrigan. They went through the back four. Will Donkey, Dave Watson, my dad, midfield, Ace Hartford, Paul Howard. And then I'm thinking, have I misheard this here? And then he went on, who's playing up front, blah, 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 blah. So at that point, I realised I'm not playing. So I turned, when I look back now, I could cringe. Well, I cringe. I just turned around to look at the reserves. So I remember Tony Buck saying, Gary, are you not interested? So I said, not really, no. I can remember vividly me saying, I said, no, not really. He said, you're not interested? We've got the derby tomorrow. I said, no, I'm not interested because I'm not playing. He said, how do you know you're not a sub? I said, because I'm not a sub. I'm not a sub. So he said, all right, if you're not a sub, then I suggest you go over to reserves and play with them. And I remember going over to Dave. And Dave said, Gary, what are you doing here? You were the first team tomorrow. I said, no, not. I think Tony Buck was going to have me as sub, and I'm not a sub, Dave. And he started laughing. He said, well, what are you doing? I said, well, he told me to come to you. He said, well, I'm glad we've got you. So I'll be more than happy for you to play for me tomorrow. Anyway, we played in the down, and we beat him 3-1. And as normal, I got booked. And all the way through from a kid, I've always been in trouble for fighting, and not so much for bad challenges, but mainly for retaliation and fighting mostly. And obviously I got booked again, and they kept telling me all the way through, look, you have to control. But I think the fire and the fighting helped me to get to where I was, because it is dog eat dog. Trust me, it is dog eat dog inside of the football team. And when you get into the football team, you have to fight for the right to play. Then you've got to fight for the right to win. So that had been brought up in me. My dad was a rugby league player. He instilled into me, stand your corner, don't let anybody bully you on the field or off the field. And it's always been in me. So I thought he was going to tell me about getting booked again in the derby. So as I came in on the Monday, the cleaner, Jimmy, the cleaner downstairs, said, oh, Gary, Tony Buck's looking for you. He's mad. So I thought, well, I know why, because I got booked again, but we won 3-1 and I scored. So I thought, right, I can stand my corner here, no problem. So Gary Owen, get in here. So Bill Taylor was in like small little, I don't know what it was. It was like a little room at the side of the stairs at Maine Road where you went upstairs from the dressing rooms. And they got me in that little room. And Tony Buck said to me, right, I'm going to say to you, and I thought, I preempted it, which I shouldn't have. I said, well, you're going to tell me again, aren't you, about me getting booked? You're going to tell me again about me getting booked. I said, well, let me just tell you, if you'd had a bit more of my fight in your team on Saturday, and I can remember saying it, perhaps you wouldn't have got beat. Oh, and he's fuming. I mean, I look at Bill Taylor. Bill Taylor's got his arms crossed. I can see him almost. I would just burst out laughing with no idea. And Tony Buck said, just shut up and listen to me. It's unprofessional. So I said, well, I'm still thinking that he's going to tell me for getting booked. I said, we won 3-1, and I'm sorry, but it's in me. And I'll tell you what, I don't want them to win anything against us. We're brought up in this club to not let United beat us, and they didn't beat us. So he said, okay, right. First of all, it's not professional what you did on Friday where you turned your back. He said, you was going to be sub. I said, but I'm not a sub. I told you on Friday I'm not a sub. He said, oh, you're not a sub? I said, no. He said, all right then. On Friday, on Saturday, we play Wolves at home, you're playing. Don't tell me, show me. So bloody hell, from that day, I was like a coil, absolutely ready to go. And I can remember, when my mum, before I wake up on the Saturday morning, and I'm going to the game, and mum said, listen, you need to have a good breakfast inside before you play. I mean, when I think now, egg, bacon, sausage, beans, good old fashioned pre-match meal. Now it's bloody old carb, it's all pasta or chicken or cornflakes or whatever it is, whatever they have now. So a good old breakfast inside before you went. Joe Roll collected me. Off we went to the game. He's telling me about the game and what I expect and all this stuff, and just said, enjoy it. So I get to change room. I'm in that changing room a year after being frightened to death of going in that changing room. Now I'm in there. There's my shirt, number 6. Alan Oakes isn't playing. I could not wait to get out. I had my kit on an hour and a quarter before the game, and I would just want to get out of the pitch. I just wanted to go out. And the pitch said, no, you can't go out. It's too early. So I had to wait. But as soon as they allow you to get out and to have a warm-up, and mainly to check your studs, so it's right length, this, that, and the other, I just wanted to get out. It was something I dreamt of all my life. I know I've played in Maine Road many, many times with reserves and that, but it was going to be 50,000 there, 52,000, Wolves at home, debut. And And as soon as I could go out, I went out to that pitch. I couldn't wait to get out. And then I didn't really want to go back in to get ready to come out when the referee blows in, and then you come down the tunnel. I wanted to just stay there then until the game started. But I had to go back in. And there's no better feeling, Mark, I can tell you, whether it's your first game, your second game, after 5 years, after 10 years. At Maine Road, it never left me walking down that tunnel, and the Kipaks would see you first. So they were the catalyst for the rest of the ground. So you'd walk down that tunnel, and as soon as the Kipaks got view of the teams coming out, the roar would start. And by the time we got out onto that pitch, it'd gone all around North Stand, Platt Lane, into the main stands. It was like it was a cordon of noise, which it stays with you forever. And, you know, Derby, I can remember it. My debut, I can remember it vividly. And every game at home, I can remember it. And the loudest noise I ever heard was one Christmas.
Boxing Day, 1977.
You know exactly right. And Paul Power was taken off at half time, and Colin came back, and we were drawing 0-0. I've got gooses even talking about it. I've got goose pimples as we speak. And Paul Power was taken off, and he brought Colin on. And Colin only had, at that point, he was one leg, really. But the atmosphere when we came out and they saw that Colin was coming on second half, I firmly believe, and they say,
it was nil-nil at that stage, Gary, wasn't it?
0-0 half-time. 0-0 half-time. And they say, you know, it's an old adage, oh yeah, the crowd can be the 13th man. They definitely was on that night. And we went on to win 4-0. And I firmly believe the atmosphere and the energy that crowd gave to our team certainly got us to not only beat Newcastle, but to beat them convincingly. And it was the appearance of Colin Bell that give everybody the lift, not just the players, but the fans, the match. And we went on to win 4-0. So Maine Road was always great atmosphere, and no more so as I can remember than that night, or should I say, after 45 minutes coming out for the second half, that noise was deafening. I mean, deafening.
Fantastic stuff. So you strike up a great understanding with Peter Barnes, both on and off the pitch. You form a strong friendship off the field.
Yeah.
How do you describe Peter as a player then, and as a friend also?
Well, he befriended me when I first went to Manchester City. So he would come stay at my house at weekends, or I'd go and stay with Pete and his family, Ken obviously, and his mum and his brothers. And sister actually at the time. So I would either be staying with him or he would stay with me. So we had a great understanding. And obviously, as I was growing up, when I was in the 18, he would be in the reserves. And when I got in the reserves, he was still there, but he would be flitting in between the first team as well. But in training, we had a great understanding, because Barnsley had great pace and trickery. There's no two ways about it. And I could pass it. But so our understanding, what they used to say, it was like a telepathy, because he knew and I knew. He knew when I had it, where I was going to hit it. I knew where he was and what he expected. So I knew that if somebody was almost inside his shirt with him that tight, it was easy to zip it into him, because he'd want it like that. It's because all he would do, so I'd zip it into him with pace, which would not allow the fullback to get in front of him. But then Barnsley, because of his pace, would obviously knock it straight back to me and get on his bike. And I could put a ball within 30 yards then, and it looked like a fantastic pass. But I had 30 yards to play it into, and his pace would get him in. If the defender decided, hang on a minute, he's got too much pace, I'll drop off him, then you can play it into his feet and let him go at it and support him. So I knew that if sometimes, especially when teams pushed up, and no matter where I was on the pitch, if Barnsley was on the halfway line and they'd pushed up, I knew I could, without even looking, and he knew what I was going to do, whether it was left or right foot, I'd just knock it over the foot, in between the centre-back and the full-back, diagonally towards the corner flag. Make sure he didn't go out of play, because Barnes' pace would always get him there. And then he had the opportunity then of zipping balls in, or taking it further and having a shot at goal or scoring. Our understanding became more and more and more, because he knew exactly wherever it was on that pitch, and I was looking for him. He knew where he was on the pitch, how I would give it to him, whether it'd be into his feet or whether I'd knock it over the top, because I'd be able to see in advance exactly how he was being marked. And our understanding came from him understanding what I expected, and me understanding what he expected, and it worked perfectly, and it did when we went to West Brom. There's no coincidence that when I went to West Brom, Ron wanted Barnsley to come as well, and eventually he did. And we've been friends, well, to this day. On a match day, I host in the Citizens. Pete works as a match day host around the grounds. So him and another player will go around, see tables and all this stuff. So we're still in contact to this day. But probably, if it had not been for Barnsley, I probably wouldn't have half the bookings I got, because I would normally fight his cause, and to my detriment most of the times.
So Tony Book was developing youngsters quickly at City. Kenny Clements, Jed Keegan are all given chances. Was there perhaps a player, Gary, you remember, who you thought in the youth team's A team would go on to have a great career, who didn't quite make it through into the first team?
One player that played, even though I'm from St Helens, although St Helens it was a St Helens postcode, but because of where I lived, in this village that I lived in, Clockface. I mean, what a name that is. I mean, famous for Clockface crisps. We had the crisp factory. But there was a bridge there, and if you lived one side of that bridge, you went to a school in St Helens. If you went the other side of the bridge, still Clockface, you went to a school in Warrington. So my senior school, I went to Warrington, eventually played for Warrington Boys, Lancashire Boys. And a player there called Steve Hughes, he was centre forward. He played Warrington Schoolboys, played Lancashire Schoolboys. I think he even played England Schoolboys. He came to City at the same time as me. For me, he broke his leg, and probably that hampered him a little. And again, maybe from that injury, maybe the club looked at him a little bit as a different player than what he was before he got that injury. Maybe he was protecting it a bit after that sort of injury. But of all the players, I thought, and in my time was that, I thought he was a certainty to come through. He's a goal scorer, he was strong. He was, I know this is probably, and I'm not exaggerating, he was a Teddy Sheringham sort of player, not blessed with electric pace, but great control. He had the presence, he worked small, he had the presence, he could shoot left foot, right foot, he was half decent in the air. Probably that injury knocked his confidence and lacked a little bit of, when I say dog eat dog, where you need to, you're playing with players, your teammates, but you really want to take their place. You do. That's exactly what it's about. If you're in the U team, you want to get in the reserve team, you want to take whoever's in your place in the reserve team. When you're reserve team, you want to get in the first team, you want to take their place. You want to take their place. Even though your teammates, it's all about what you do. And he probably just lacked a little bit of that after that broken leg, which is a shame, because without doubt, he was a talented, gifted player. Went on to play amateur leagues and was outstanding there. I think he got to Wembley with one of the teams he played with in non-league. And when you ask me if there's anybody, he stands out for me, without doubt. And maybe in another time, another place, maybe not the broken leg. Yeah, sure. Maybe you might be speaking to him now.
So following your debut, the following season, you firmly established yourself in Tony Book's side, over 30 appearances. City are beaten to the title by a single point for Liverpool that season. So how would you enjoy life as a first division footballer, and what are your memories of that campaign? City finished runners-up.
It was, well, we looked at because the team, and what a team it was, by the way, could look at the fixtures when it came out, and it'd be in the changing, we'd look, and you could hear the conversations. Yeah. Who's that? Leicester, yeah, we beat them 4. Newcastle, yeah, 3 or 4. They would almost know by what score they were going to beat teams by. And it was a confidence that you thought, right, so even before you went out, we played Leicester one time, I think Brian Kidd scored 4, we beat them 5-0, I think. But before we went out there, I mean, they'd already written on it was going to be 4. I mean, on the fixture list in the changing room, 4. And Brian Kidd got 4 that day. But we were going out to teams that had fear of nobody. And I mean, nobody we had fear of. We just expected to win. We never thought that anybody would beat us. And that is an unbelievable piece of armour to have. If mentally you think we can't get beat, and you just look around the dressing room, you see the quality of players we had. We had creative, we had young, we had experience, we had internationals of all levels, full international, young internationals. England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, everybody, all the home nations players that were either ready to come in or were in the team, and establish internationals. It was a great time, and you can look back and think of games that probably, if you'd have won that game, we might have won the championship. But Liverpool could also look back and think, well, if they'd have won that game or not lost that game, but it was probably as close as City have been to winning the league from the Bell Lee Sunbury era until the most recent in 2012. So it just shows you how close we got to it. But in football, it's all about fine lines, and the fine line was 1 point. And one everybody speaks to me about and talks to me about that game when we played Liverpool on that frosted. Now they wouldn't probably play that game. It was frosted ground. Ball was bouncing all over, and Ray Clements' kick went out. We're leading 1-0. Dave Watson, thinking Joe was back because he was outside the box and bouncing from him, so he just nodded it back to Joe. But Joe had come behind him, and he nodded it over Joe's head, and I can still see. I don't think it hit the net. It just bump, 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 and trickled over the line. I don't think it even hit the net. And obviously we drew 1-1. But another instance when we played Derby away, and we got beat 4-0. That was the famous one as well, where you'll see it many, many times, where the referee had to come on and count the 12 yards and put the spot on because you couldn't see it because of the mud. And I was alleged to have upended Archie Gemmell for the penalty, but I knew when he was coming in what he was going to do. So if you watch back on it now and see it on YouTube, I put my arms up to let him go past, because I thought, if I try and make a challenge here, he's going to go down. And I didn't even get in contact with him. And he just kicked the back of his own heel and went down. And from where the ref could had a view, he obviously thought I'd made contact, although I put my arms up to let him get past, get out of the way, because I knew what he was going to do. And then they scored for the penalty, but we got beat 4-0. But I remember they scored the penalty, and Archie Gemmell, as we went back to the halfway line, went up to Brian Kidd and said, Kiddo, how's it feel to lose 100 grand? Because I think 100 grand was when you think now, I think a championship players get 100 grand a week. This was 100 grand. Yeah, this was 100 grand for the squad to win the league. And he said to Kiddo, hey, how's this feel? How's it feel to lose 100 grand? And Kiddo was obviously a lot taller than him, and he grabbed him by those strands of hair that was going across, like the Bobby Charlton strands of hair that went. So grabbed him by his hair and kneed him in the meat and two veg, and just said, how does this feel? Bang! And he went down. Brian King sent off, down to 10 men. Tony Buck after the game saying, Kiddo, I've told you millions of times, count to 10 before you get involved in any of that stuff. He said, I counted to 10. 1, 3, 5, 10. Bang! Down he went. So although we lost it to a point, there were certain games there that gave, stories that you could tell. Goals. We played Bristol City. I scored. That was the game after 18 games, we got beat 1-0. I scored after about 11 minutes, and they said I was offside. And again, you watch YouTube, you can see quite easily I was not offside. And it's like fine lines, fine margins. We score first, they don't get back in it. They screw up to goal, and they beat us 1-0. We never looked like getting beat there, but chances didn't go in. We had one chalked off, which we shouldn't have done, and they sneaked one in. And then we'd gone 18 games undefeated. We lost that game, but we went on and had a great season, and it was a joy to play with those players. Not just because how great players they were, but what you could learn from them. And